The latest threat that's picking up steam in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm meteorologist Julie Martin, joined by storm specialist Carl Parker. He's in the lab this evening. We're going to get it over to Carl in just a moment. First, though, checking in on Beta, a 60-mile-per-hour storm in the Gulf of Mexico right now. It has been stationary throughout the day today, not moving at all. The bulk of the moisture really off to the north and northeast, and even impacting Louisiana. But the expectation is that this will drift off to the west here. And for that reason, we do have potential impacts to the Texas coast. So a hurricane watch up from Corpus Christi, Port O'Connor, and through Galveston. Those are all areas we need to be monitoring. Also, tropical storm watches all the way from the Mexican border over into Morgan City, Louisiana. So certainly a widespread area where we could see some impacts from Beta, which right now doesn't appear to be all that organized, but nonetheless could pack a lot of rainfall. And so we're concerned about flash flooding as well. We're even talking about the city of Houston being in line for potential flash flooding from Beta. So these are all things to just be aware of over the next couple of days. Could be looking at a Monday into Tuesday type event here in many of these cases, Carl. And even though the storm may not look so impressive right now, it still has some time.
It does have some time. That's right, Julie. And, you never want to say never. The one thing that I think is hopeful in this case is the incredible presence of dry air now across Texas and the Western Gulf and Mexico. There's this vast area of dry air, and tropical cyclones don't like dry air, generally speaking. So, I think that that's a good thing. That's probably going to limit the intensity of this storm, but certainly you got to keep your eye on them. And every once in a while, they can manage to fend that off and sort of encircle themselves with an area of humid air and thunderstorms. But right now, what we're looking at is a 60-mile-per-hour storm. They did find some evidence of wind that strong, but as you go across, the hurricane hunters went across the center several times. For the most part, it wasn't showing a wind that strong. That was one little area where we saw some wind up in that range. And here you see the forecast, which has been adjusted based on this environment, based on the model guidance, which considers the environment. And so this has been a definitive downward trend in terms of intensity, whereas forecasts from last night and earlier today were calling for there to be a hurricane. And then at the 5 o'clock advisory today, they backed off on that and went to strong tropical storm. And now they've backed off even a little bit more, dropping it by another 10 miles per hour. And this forecast is on the high end of the model intensity guidance. So it's entirely possible that it ends up being not as strong as this. Let's hope for that. And if that's the case, then that is going to have not just an impact on the wind, but also the surge, because the surge is a function of that wind. As you look at the satellite picture right now, you can see what a hard time this thing is having. I mean, it's really, really struggling right now to keep those thunderstorms going about the center. And again, that has so much to do with not just the wind shear, but what type of wind is being driven into the storm. All that orange is showing you where the dry air is, and that's where the storm is going. It's going to the west. So a lot of the intensity guidance showing it topping out at a mid-grade tropical storm intensity. But even if it's not a stronger storm, it will have potential to produce a lot of heavy rain. It's most likely going to go to the coast and then slow down and move up and along the coast. And as that happens, we could be talking about a pretty sizable area of 3 to 4 to 5 inches of rain, including the Houston metro, including southern Louisiana. So certainly there is a lot of worry about the flash flood threat. And then there is also potentially some surge on the way for the Texas coast, maybe 2 to 4 feet, depending on just how much structure this thing has. But, I think this model might be doing a pretty good job of showing you how, it never does become really, really organized. But maybe near the core there, we do find some more persistent storms and some heavy rain along with that. Julie, over to you.
All right, we take a look at a city like Houston, what we can expect for you looking at our future radar. A lot of this rain could reach Houston. So we will start things off here early Sunday morning, starting to see some showers come through Galveston. And then by Sunday afternoon, does look like we'll get some more robust rain starting to work its way in and around the Houston metro. But certainly not just Sunday, into Monday as well. We'll look at more rain to come. It's going to be maybe a Monday into Tuesday, maybe even into late Tuesday here in Houston for you. So looking at the rain over the next several days, maybe through midweek. So that could really pile up, and we could see maybe 3 to 5 inches of rain coming your way. Brownsville, another area to watch for the flooding as well. Continuing to track through the break.
Of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
All right, we're continuing to track Tropical Storm Beta in the Gulf of Mexico at this hour. A 60-mile-per-hour storm, not very organized right now, but could get its act together a little bit more over the next couple of days. It's been stationary or just kind of parked there over the day today and not really moving at all. But we do expect it to move off to the west here, and for that reason we have hurricane watches up, including for the city of Corpus Christi, Galveston, Port O'Connor, that particular zone, and then tropical storm watches and warnings also in yellow and red here, beginning here in Brownsville, Texas, stretching all along the Texas coast into Louisiana, Morgan City. So again, a pretty wide area where we could actually see some impacts from Beta. And one of those being flash flooding. So certainly from Bay City to Rockport, Galveston, as we mentioned, even Houston could take on a lot of rain, tropical moisture from Beta, and that could trigger some flooding by the time we get into the first part of this week. So we're going to have to watch this. I think will be one of the biggest concerns with Beta as we head through the next couple of days. And then storm surge could also be an issue, a water rise of maybe 2 to 4 feet. Well, Lake Charles, Louisiana, taking the brunt of the eye wall from Hurricane Laura as it came ashore as a Category 4 hurricane earlier this year. Now, this video shows the walls of water battering the town. The city doused by anywhere from 5 to 8 inches of rain. In fact, the entire Gulf region has been saturated this summer, meaning any rain that Tropical Storm Beta brings, well, that could lead to major flood threats. And Carl, especially along the Gulf Coast, just so much rainfall and so many storms. This is just not what we need.
Yeah, we've had some real incredible rainfall producers in the last couple of weeks. Of course, Sally is the one that really stands out. We got some areas that got more than 30 inches of rain in Northwest Florida along with that. And then Laura was also a prolific rainmaker, as that came in as a Category 4 not very long ago in late August. And we've also had quite a bit of wet weather with Hannah in deep South Texas. So when you look at the amount of moisture in the ground, it is definitely higher across the northern Gulf Coast from Louisiana into Northwest Florida. So those are areas where you've got what we would call saturated ground. It's going to make it more easy to get flooding that way. But then when you look at the upper Texas coast, you see that there is a relatively dry ground there. There's not a lot of water in the ground. So that may help somewhat to mitigate the flood threat. Of course, if we do get too much rain in a short period of time, then that can overcome that very easily. Rainfall rates can easily overwhelm whatever is going on with the amount of moisture in the ground. Looking at the current satellite and radar picture, we see that this thing is just not well organized at all. Now, that could change some, but there's an awful lot of dry air now over Texas and over the Western Gulf, and that will continue to plague the system, most likely as it works off to the west. So here's the European model showing it coming in, maybe approaching the coast tomorrow, and then continuing to slowly move in between Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, then taking a little more of a turn off towards the north here. So that very slow forward speed, depending on just how well formed that core is, could mean a lot of very heavy rain in some areas. And that, by the way, is something that we've seen more of, Julie, in recent years. Tropical systems slowing down, which, makes a lot of sense, because if you're increasing your warm season and your fronts are coming down later in the season, well, are where you get all the strong winds. So without them, you're just not going to have as much wind to steer these things along.
All right, Carl, absolutely right. And it's not just Beta that we're concerned about. We have Hurricane Teddy in the Atlantic. That's really going to churn up the East Coast here and creating some rip currents and big waves. We've got Beta, as we've been telling you about, Tropical Storm Wilfred, and also another area to watch with about a 60% chance of development. So we'll start here with Wilfred, 40-mile-per-hour storm right now. It is well out to sea. And the good news with this one is it's really not going to have any impact on land. So we're looking at it basically starting to fall apart and eventually probably dissipate even by the time we hit Tuesday of this week. Post-Tropical Storm Paulette, this one is interesting. Right now it's got about a 50% chance of redeveloping if it sags a little bit to the south and encounters some more favorable conditions. This Paulette could redevelop into a tropical system. So we'll watch that. That would be near the Azores. And then we have, Teddy, and Teddy is the one that is currently a Category 3. Now, that's just going to probably miss Bermuda, but with that, it's going to really churn up the ocean, and it's a big, big hurricane. So we are going to be dealing with impacts along the east coast of the United States. So this season, it's been extraordinarily busy, right? Dr. Marshall Shepard, host of the Weather Geeks podcast, looks at how a changing climate could be influencing these stronger and more dangerous storms.
We knew that there was going to be an active hurricane season because of the sea surface temperatures, lack of El Nino, and so forth. But there are some climate change signals in there that we have to look closely at. For example, we're seeing more occurrence of rapid intensification. We saw it with Hurricane Sally. We saw it with Hurricane Laura. Recently, we saw it with Hurricane Michael. We have warmer ocean waters, and these waters are deep and warm too. So even when these storms are approaching landfall and they churn up a lot of cold water, the water's still warm enough to support hurricane development. So rapid intensification is something that we certainly expected. More intense hurricanes on average is something that climate change will likely bring us. And something that we recently saw with Hurricane Sally in the Gulf of Mexico, it slowed down. There's peer-reviewed literature that suggests that in North America, at least, hurricanes are slowing down when they get to the coast, and there may be a link to climate change there. It's a bit complex in terms of the steering patterns and so forth, but that's something that I've seen recently with storms like Sally, Harvey, and Florence.
Team coverage of Tropical Storm Data starts tomorrow morning on AMHQ. Weekend along the Texas coast. Mike Seidel, Reynolds Wolf, and Tevin Wooten, they'll be bringing you the very latest, and we'll be on the air all day covering the latest changes to the forecast.
We were watching it before our girls' weekend this weekend. Some people came down on Thursday. We came today, and we're planning on leaving on Monday. But we've been watching the Weather Channel. We understand the storm surge is coming, and we're not going to chance it. We're going to evacuate like they've asked. So we're going to get out of here early tomorrow morning.
All right, always good to listen to local officials. These are visitors along the Texas coast. Port O'Connor, home to 26 miles of family beaches, a very big destination for Gulf fishing enthusiasts, and there has been a voluntary evacuation issued for some parts of that region. Now, we are seeing some better news as regards this storm, particularly as compared to, say, the morning forecast and the forecast from last night. It was expected that the storm could become a hurricane. That appears less likely now. You can tell by looking at this thing on the satellite that it's not doing very well at all. 60 miles per hour might be a little generous right now, even though they did find some evidence of that in some parts of that circulation. For the most part, right now, it is just not a very well-formed storm. And now in the forecast, not expected to get stronger. It's expected to maintain its intensity in the forecast, but they do note that that forecast is at the high end of the intensity guidance. So that means that it's also possible that it's even weaker than this. Maybe a low-grade tropical storm coming into the coast, in which case we'd be talking about less threat from wind, obviously, but also from surge and from waves. The one thing that might not change that much would be the rainfall, because you've got a slower moving system, so certainly there's going to be concern about heavy rain, even if it does end up not being that strong. So, Julie, still a lot to figure out here, but the news generally has been good through the course of the day today.
It has, but we know many of you have questions about the tropics, so with so much going on, we're going to answer some of your questions right now. Let's take a look at the first one here. And it does look like we're getting that into our system right about now. Here we go. Chelsea Burke, how do the named storm totals to date compare with the predicted season totals? Do you think there will be more named storms than predicted?
Well, yeah, I mean, there were way more storms in terms of the number of storms than, was predicted. That's for sure, because the predictions were generally on the order, of, although I will say, now these are the most recent predictions and they've gone up quite a bit. So if you want to go back to the original, the very first predictions, well, they weren't as aggressive as this, and what they do is they adjust them as there are more and more storms. And so, as it stands, it looks like it's going to end up being, these will end up being, reasonable predictions. But there you see, we've had 23 named storms altogether. But one important figure to look at is the ACE, that's the accumulated cyclone energy. And that's been pretty high today. That's been pretty high, I should say, as of late, much higher than average. That's the total amount of wind produced by all the storms added all together.
All right, well, we want to take it now to the west, where there's no sign the fire season's going to let up anytime soon. Weather Channel's Justin Michaels has been bringing us the stories from the communities that have been devastated by the relentless California fires.
In the days after the wildfires tore through Berry Creek, California, signs of life are starting to return. These deer may be a little worse for the wear, but they are alive. Their forest hideaways burned into memory. The same goes for these two beautiful horses, enveloped in smoke, alone in a field, still breathing in the fumes from the fire that ravaged this area just days earlier. Highlighting the need for animal rescues like this one, run by the North Valley Animal Disaster Group.
It takes an army, honestly, to take care of these guys.
In the haste of leaving, with a moment's notice, many had to make the unbearable decision to leave their pets and animals behind. And this isn't the first time.
So a lot of these animals actually went through the campfire, too.
Like their owners, some of these animals have survived 2 record-breaking fires in 2 years.
There's animals with burns, there's animals that are colicking because of the stress.
More than 25 volunteers here at this one large animal clinic are working very hard, day and night, to give these animals the things they need after the fires. Like Zora here, just wants a little love. And there's more than just the physical health component to these horses. There's also a mental health component to their recovery.
I do believe a lot of them have PTSD after an event such as this. So we try to accommodate each animal individually.
He's 45 years old.
Tanya Kieselbach's old boy Casper needed rescuing.
Little Caspy. He's such a good little guy.
Casper suffered some burns, but otherwise he's doing just fine.
They got him back up and took care of him, and now he's going to be okay again.
And look who else we found here too. Those 2 horses cloaked in smoke in that mountain pasture. Their names? Olive and Mario. They'll get the care and attention they need here until their owners can care for them again. In Oroville, California, Justin Michaels, the Weather Channel.
Good to see they're getting that help. And speaking of the fires, currently 84 active U.S. fires, over 5 million acres there. Some rain did come in this week, but the air quality is still really poor places like Medford, Seattle. So we're still not quite there yet. We did get some rain, as I mentioned, in and around Seattle, Portland, down to Medford, some of your first measurable rainfall in months. So that's some good news. Could get some more rain later on this week as well, but still the situation is a desperate one there in California.
I'm Carl Parker. We are following a tropical storm, which is now in the northwestern part of the Gulf of Mexico, 60-mile-per-hour storm, and it's not very well formed, as you can see. It's been really undergoing a lot of difficulty in terms of the environment, wind shear and dry air in place. And so it's not expected to do anything but hold its own, and even that might be generous. This forecast at the top end of the current intensity guidance. And so what we're looking at here is perhaps a mid-grade tropical storm, but maybe something less than that coming towards the Texas Gulf Coast, and that's going to be towards late tomorrow and Monday. And so, if it's not as strong, then that's going to mean a little less impact in terms of wind and surge. There will be, however, some heavy rain out of the system, and because it's not moving that fast, that could be one of the biggest impacts. But looking at the dry air here, you can see all that orange color. That is dry air. That kills off the thunderstorms near the center of circulation. And as long as the thunderstorms near that center can't maintain themselves, you're just not going to see an intensifying tropical cyclone. But even if it's a little more modest, it will have opportunity to produce heavy rain along the upper Texas coast, as well as in Louisiana, pretty sizable areas of 3 to 4 to 5 inches of rain. So flooding is going to be a worry. And we're also concerned about the potential for surge. There's a forecast of 2 to 4 feet of surge along the Texas coast. Again, the storm is going to be approaching tomorrow and may move in as we get into the day on Monday. We will continue to have complete coverage on this tropical storm starting tomorrow morning at 6 a.m.